Hi, this is Chris Schroeder reporting for the Jesuit Post, and I'm here with Mike Merrill, also known as Traded Person. And so, hi, Mike. Thanks for talking to us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
One of the things uh, that I found interesting about your project is that I was talking it over with another Jesuit friend of mine. And so, as Jesuits, we take vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and they're kind of permanent deals. And so we were kind of sympathetic to your project where you kind of make this commitment and have long-term unforeseen consequences coming from that. I was wondering, do you feel yourself like, are you responding to a kind of call or a higher order of value or something that you're looking to recognize?
Yeah, I think it's for me going into this, it's less about like thinking, oh, this is how things should be out here, and I'm going to build this whole thing. It was much more ad hoc and kind of came together
Yeah.
piece by piece. But I think what I've found is probably similar to, and again, probably also on a much lower level, but there is this sense of my communities holding me accountable, right?
Okay.
Like I have these people that I said I'm going to do, X, Y, or Z, and they said, okay, in that case, we will kind of support you and be a part of this with you. And so there is this sense of if I fail to do these things, I'm not just failing myself, which is like this thing that is kind of easy to justify, like, oh, I'll get back to it next time. But the days I wake up and I don't want to put a tie on or something, I think about like, oh, well, there's the shareholders kind of out there, giving me this pressure, which I think is a positive pressure.
Uh-huh. Do you ever have a moment where that pressure becomes either too much, you experience it in a more negative way?
Definitely, it's come up. Like, I mean, just I feel like it magnifies both the positive and the negative. So on
Okay.
the times when I'm feeling really like I just don't want to either, um, it yeah, it's mostly laziness, right? Like it comes up where it's like I just don't want to do anything. I want to just like relax, watch TV, not be this sort of best version of myself that I'm trying to become. Those are the times when and then yeah, it's like a magnification of guilt. It's like, oh, I'm not only failing myself, but I'm failing all these other people that are part of this thing with me. And in that way, while it might make me feel worse, it motivates me to actually like correct my behavior.
That's fascinating. Uh, and one of the things, that one of the questions that I just keep ruminating on is, so you define yourself as a corporate person. It's so KMikeyM, I believe that's the name
Right.
for the corporate you.
Yep.
I- And how would you define a successful KMikeyM?
It it's interesting because I think my version of it is something like this, and that overlaps with a shareholder here. So then you have this tiny
Right.
piece, and then that overlaps with another shareholder. And so it's a collective idea of what it is, and it starts to get really sort of cloudy as it spreads out. And it also shifts because different shareholders coming in and out, and even different shareholders' expectations at different times. And so I think it's less this concrete exact thing and more this kind of general direction or general style or way of life that I'm sort of guiding. Like it's not these hard edged walls that I'm trapped between. It's kind of this fog on either side that I'm trying to navigate. But it is very much the thing that's attractive about the sort of corporate structure is that it, it's very measurable, obviously, with this kind of idea of profits and reporting and all this kind of thing. And it's a really good structure for a lot of people to all interact together, because you have kind of this hierarchy and people kind of understand like, oh, at work we work together to work on something. And currently the idea of the corporation is in our culture is kind of villainized. I mean, I
Hmm.
think in like every major Hollywood movie, the villain is like the corporate bad guy. But I really like going back and looking at kind of the origin of it and kind of these first companies that were like, let's start a company, and it's a thing where a bunch of people would get together, fund a boat to go out and kind of find riches, and then come back. And the corporate charter ended when that boat came back and sort of divvied up all the spoils, and it was over. So it took a while before we evolved into this thing of like, let's have the corporation live forever. Like that's a later evolution of what a company is. And so really I start thinking about it, well, like anytime I work on anything with some other people, then that's kind of a company already. So it didn't feel that far of a stretch to sort of, don the robes of corporatehood as a person, as a way to sort of collectivize with everyone. Um, the other thing is it's so it does create a structure, even one that's sort of invented and artificial upon which to judge success. And so I can say, oh well, what should I do in this case? Well, that it's a lot easier to decide what should KMikeyM, the corporate person, do.
Uh-huh.
That's a much more clear mandate.
So I think I'm with you on the kind of communitarian decision making, and certainly community plays a big part in our lives as Jesuits. But where I get off the train is when it becomes monetized, right? So
Right.
and and I guess my question would then be what happens if that vision shifts to a
Right.
more profit driven vision for
So to be
you?
f- right, to be fair, my mom is not a shareholder. She also doesn't believe that you should measure someone's influence in your life by how much money they've spent,
Yeah.
which is a very fair criticism, and I think is really the kind of it's the upsetting part of this project. But the idea is to look at money as a form of time, right? So
Hmm.
you and I can spend time together, and through the time that we spend together, you will have influence over my life. Like, humans are social creatures. We're gonna what you say and how you dress and what we talk about will influence me in some way. So but while you're spending that time with me, you're not going out and earning any money potentially,
Okay.
right? Like, so yeah, so then it just kind of becomes a thing. Well, if money is time, why don't I let you go out and spend your time earning money in the best way that you know how, and I'll just value that time through this measurement that we have, which is money. So you can have that same amount of influence, and you can just buy it in the sense of buying these votes. And so the idea is kind of a perverse way of kind
Right.
of optimizing, which I agree is flawed, largely flawed, from a conceptual level, because we don't obviously I don't value the input of a total stranger who buys a bunch of shares as much as I value what my girlfriend thinks,
Right.
right? Like she has a much bigger influence on my life, even if she's a smaller shareholder.
Right.
But in terms of KMikeyM, the person, when it all comes down to measuring those votes, then that's the point at which they are equal, and that's where it
Right.
gets really interesting and strange. And I'm less interested in arguing if it's a good idea or a bad idea, because I can see many ways in which it's a bad idea. I'm more interested to see how it actually works and how it plays out.
Okay.
And I think for me, that's kind of the experimental part of the KMikeyM project is, can the system evolve to solve those issues?
Hmm.
Like any of those problems that come up, can we add some different rules, or can we incorporate sort of natural kind of the idea of being a human into this idea of being a kind of corporate person, or do they always have to be separate and kind of at odds? Yeah. So I mean, that's the hard part.
Right. What what would be off the table then? Like, would there be a moment where you say, "Okay, this is getting too real. I'm hitting the ejector seat now."
I think more likely what would happen is there would come up a vote that would push me to do something I'm unwilling to do.
Hmm.
Like, let's say something criminal, for example.
Okay.
If I don't do that, then my shareholders obviously will have less faith in me as a corporate person, and my stock price should go down because
Right.
I'm not following, right? But I still have the choice. Like, just because it's voted in, I still have the choice of whether or not to follow it and report back to them in these things. So, in some ways, nothing's off the table, because I'll always have the opportunity to refuse it. And that's
Okay.
well within, the project itself. Sort of, but I also have some control in, ultimately I get to decide what goes up for vote. And I've taken a lot of things from shareholders and put them up even when I didn't necessarily want them to pass. But largely it's things that I'm convinced are something that a corporate person should allow its shareholders to vote on. So um, yeah, it's I don't like to call it a game because I think I do take it a lot more seriously, and I don't, I don't turn it off. I don't leave the game.
Hmm.
But there is an element of kind of play
Okay.
involved in it. Like where we're all kind of like, oh, what happens if we do this? Okay, and now what happens if we do this? So there's a playfulness in it, for sure.
So it would it one of the another question that I would have is there a sense in what is it that's for sale? Is it you yourself as a
Hmm.
person? Is it your decisions? Is it
Right. It's I think it kind of goes back to that influence, right? So
uh-huh.
what I've decided is that anything I would normally ask my friends advice for, that's a question that should go up for shareholder vote.
Hmm.
And so that's what's for I've been talking about it a lot as a decision making engine. And so the idea is it's less about this sense of ownership. That's
Hmm.
just the model that we're borrowing kind of from the corporate side, and
Right.
it's more about this sense of, can my community of my self-selected community, they decide who they are. Can they enhance my life? Can they help me make better decisions? And I think so far, in the 5 years I've been doing this, that the answer is still yes. But it's there's still a lot of things to explore.
What's what's one thing that you've learned through the course of this project that you would never have been able to find out or recognized without it?
I used to have a real mistrust of kind of the concept of the masses of people. I've always been very community driven and working with a lot of different people, and I've always thought that there's a line between those that are within my community and those that are without outside of my community. And I got really really nervous when I saw, I had a bunch of press that was really big, and I had a flood of new shareholders, and it became the majority of the people that were now shareholders were people I didn't know anymore. And I didn't know how that was going to change things, because before I could think about like, oh, I'm going to put this up for vote, and I kind of know how this person's going to vote. I should probably send that person an email before it goes to vote. It gets kind of political, and I'm kind of trying to figure out, get everybody on board if I want something to pass. Um, and it became really scary in the sense of like, oh, now what? And the votes that I've put up, the feedback has always been either they don't know enough. Like I haven't done. I always have to go back and like add more context, because I forget that they're strangers. They're not these people that have been along the whole way. But I've really grown to trust them, because the project only attracts people that kind of want to participate in this positive way. No one has bought shares just to kind of vote things down, or vote bad things up and that kind of thing, because no one wants to invest their own money in that kind of thing. So I feel like what I've realized is, if you put something out there, you don't really have to worry about kind of negative attention, because really the people that stick around is going to be kind of people that think positively about the project. And that's been really kind of reassuring in a way, especially for this project.
Do you have any lesson that you might want to offer for the general viewership of the Jesuit Post?
I think there is a sense that you really can't trust your community. Again, I'm measuring my community influence in this kind of weird way, but I think the larger kind of takeaway is that external view, that kind of objective view of your immediate community, of people that really understand what's going on around you, is incredibly valuable. And I think especially, our Western culture, we have this real like, you know, go it alone, be, you're your own person, and you have to kind of do things that strengthen the individual. And I don't think that's as true. I think that's a little bit of a Hollywood myth. I think this idea is, we are a member of the community of people around us, and that's important. And if you're in a community that is, pushing you in the wrong direction, you need to change that. I mean, it's like, your parents telling you you're hanging out with a bad crowd or something. I think there's a lot more to that. Yeah, I believe it a lot more strongly after this project.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. That's a vision of community very different than most of ours, but we do appreciate you talking with us here today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really fun. Thank you.